What's up, guys? Josh Lau here with the Card Guys, and I am back home from my European adventure to Worlds and to several other countries in Europe. Uh, long trip, but good to be back home. And I've been wanting to make some videos on the World Championship, a little bit about some deck lists, and just get back to the content grind. So today we're going to be talking about the list that I took to Worlds. It is a Boltyn list. In hindsight, I probably should have took Dorinthia, but I did not expect there to be that many Icelanders, and there were a lot, and I got punished for that. But yeah, that's hindsight's 2020, right? But so I want to go through the deck list that I brought to Worlds. I also want to talk about the main board, sideboard, and then I want to talk a little bit about my tournament report. So like what my matchups were and how it went. And then I also want to talk about where I see Boltyn going now that Icelander has rotated. I actually think, just to sum it up, I think Boltyn's in a very strong position. And I think there's going to be a decent amount of people that are going to be, exploring him. So I do want to give some, like a good starting point for people to start exploring Boltyn in the new format. All right, so first up, let's take a look at the main board and sideboard, and then we'll come back and chit chat about the actual tournament report and what my list would look like post Worlds. So let's just jump into my Worlds deck list now. All right, guys, this is the main board for the list that I took to Worlds. So first of all, the ratios here, there are 11 red cards and every other card here is yellow. And the main reason for that is this card in the middle here, Prayer of Boltyn. There's also some other reasons like Beaming Bravado, but this is really the main focus of the deck, is to make sure that Prayer of Boltyn will hit most of the time. We didn't take this to the extreme though. We still have some reds. So let me go through the reds and tell you why these actually made the cut. And then we'll kind of go through the rest of the deck, right? So in terms of our reds, we have 3 Beaming Bravado, 3 Take Flights, 3 Bolt of Courage, and 2 Illuminates. Beaming Bravado is just excellent value. It is basically the replacement for Express Lightning. Basically, if you charge a yellow card, this will become 4, and then you can easily give it go again with Boltyn's hero ability, and then swing rated. So this basically gives you a 2-card 7, and it allows you to, if they want to defend, certain decks like Bravo Dash is really difficult for them to defend, and it also allows you to take care of dragons. It's just a really key part. Also costs 0, so it's great in the Sabres version as well. Then we have Take Flight. So Take Flight, even though it costs 1, is still pretty good. So in the Raiden build, generally we want to use our Tunic on V or on Prayer, but using our Tunic on Take Flight is okay because that gives us soul positive. So let's talk really briefly about the concept of soul positive. So Take Flight is soul positive. Illuminate, Engulfing Light, Soul Shield, these are all soul positive. Prayer Boltyn is soul positive. So eventually, this will allow, if you double charge V, that's also soul positive. Eventually, this will allow you to use Beacon of Victory for a large number, or this will allow you to use Celestial Cataclysm as part of your attack pattern. And there's a strong correlation between using Celestial Cataclysm and winning the game. 7 go again with 1 card is no joke, right? And you could think of the cost of banishing 3 cards as really it's banishing 2 cards, because as long as you're doing a wide attack pattern, having go again is really important. So yeah, that's kind of what we're working towards. So Take Flight, Prayer, all these cards down here, they all contribute to doing that, right? And that's one of the reasons why Prayer Boltyn is really underrated, and I think this is a really, really key card in Boltyn's arsenal going forward. So yeah, anyways, Take Flight is really good. Also, it's great post combo because Take Flight into Saber is, nice consistent damage. Take Flight into Valiant Thrust is also very nice. It's one of the better cards to draw post combo. Bolt of Courage. This card is ridiculous. This is the card that you want to start your combo with. This is the card you want to end your V chain with. This is one of the most dangerous combo starters as well. Solid card, costs 0, does everything you want it to do. We also got 2 copies of Illuminate here. This is kind of it's kind of like Sharpen Steel and Dory. It's like the deck doesn't quite feel right if you don't have a couple of these. They're great 1-card hands. They chip down armor. They're great with via the Vanguard. They can be used as a starter with Warband of Boltyn. There's a lot of the soul positive. There's a lot of good things that Illuminate does, and I think 2 is kind of the correct ratio here. So yeah, that's why we keep them here. So in terms of the yellows, if we're running the red, most of the time the yellow is good enough, right? So we have 3 red Beaming Bravado, we have 3 yellow. 3 red Take Flight, 3 yellow Take Flights. 3 bolts red, 3 bolts yellow. Now, I did not go with the yellow Illuminate, mainly because we wanted some more charge cards. And Engulfing Light is actually Engulfing Light yellow is actually a very, very nice medium point here. We want to have enough charge cards such that our combos are consistent, our rating game plan is consistent, and Engulfing Light yellow is actually not too bad at like clearing things. Like if you have to send Engulfing Light into a dragon, that's not actually the worst thing in the world. Going up 2 soul is meaningful, right? Also, it's just a role player here. If you have to start your combo, you generally want to start with a 0-cost charge card, and now we have like just enough that it's relatively consistent, right? So yellow Engulfing Light, although it looks a little weird here, I think is the perfect card for that. All right, let's move on to some more cards here. They're fairly unique cards, so we're going to talk about them one by one. In terms of bannerets, we have Banneret of Courage, Banneret of Gallantry. These are the best bannerets. Banneret of Courage, probably slightly better in my opinion. Sometimes you do waste the Quicken token depending on your attack pattern. Sometimes you could be given extra Quicken tokens by Bravo. Like there's a little bit of redundancy there, but they're both really, really strong. If you can charge on a V turn, that's really nice. Sometimes it allows you to so the Quicken token allows you to be soul positive some of the time because you don't have to give things go again. And the Banneret of Courage allows you to give go again to things that normally wouldn't have go again. And it just allows you to get that tiny little bit extra value. So they're both there. There's 6 of them. It costs 1, so it's not really we never really will be wanting to play these. We want to be charging them or blocking with them in general. All right. Here we go. Prayer Boltyn. This is kind of the core of the deck. And I think I need to spend quite a bit of time talking about this card because this is the card that it on paper it doesn't look very strong, right? So I will read it to you guys. So it's a 1-cost light warrior action. It says the next attack this turn gains +2. So it, unlike yellow Come to Fight, which it is often compared to, it says next attack. So it could be your weapon attack or your attack action card. It says reveal the top card of your deck. If it is yellow, put it into your hand, then charge your hero's soul. It has go again. So with the current configuration of the deck, you're basically going to hit 75 to 80% of the time. And if you use the Tunic, which you're going to be using the Tunic in almost all the matchups, basically you want to see a Take Flight, a Prayer, or a V when your Tunic turns to 3. And then you're going to start counting back up the Tunic. that's when you want to see another one of these, right? So having like 12 outlets for the tunic allows things to be smooth, right? And tunic prayer is really, really, really efficient because it leads to a celestial cataclysm eventually down the line. By itself, it's not actually that strong, but eventually it leads into something ridiculous. So don't sleep on this card. It's really just try it. I know people have tried it, but they were trying it in like 0-60-0 decks. Now, but I think these reds over here are just too important to like ignore. So we are taking some risk with the prayer. Sometimes it is going to be yellow come to fight, but more often than not, there's some really, really, really ridiculous play patterns that you can get into, right? For example, if you have a Lumina in Arsenal and then you tunic prayer, you get a yellow card, charge it, and then you can just go with Lumina there. It's really, really, really efficient. It allows you to play some very, very nice one card hands. And basically, let's say you don't have Lumina in Arsenal. Let's say you literally only have Prayer Bellata, one card hand. Tunic Prayer is a Raiden for 5 and a carded soul. A 1 card 5 plus a soul is really, really, really above rate. So, good card. Play it more. Speaking of good cards, Soul Shield. This is another card that eventually allows you to be soul positive. And it's really, really important. Having a heavy D-React in this format is quite nice. Great against Bravo, great against Azalea, great against Dorinthia. It's really, really useful to have. Even against decks that you may not get the full value out of it. Maybe they only come in for 4 or 5. Eventually, like I said, over the course of 8 to 10 turns, eventually you'll set up a situation where you can use Celestial Cataclysm, which is really how you push damage in this deck. Okay, moving on. Via the Vanguard. So this, again, coupled with Take Flight and Prayer, like I said many times, this is our Tunic outlet. Tunic V, double charge is one of the most powerful things you could do with this deck. Preferably charging a Banneret. And things get really, really, really ridiculous if you have Spirit of Arena out coupled with Lumina, or just V into several things, into a Bolt or Engulfing Light or Illuminate at the end. If you have V and a Beacon, things can get really, really ridiculous as well. So V, if you double charge, it combines nicely with Bolting Blade, because Bolting Blade will come in for a 1 card 9. This is really, really key. You almost always want to play this with a Tunic counter on. So yeah, strong card. Also good. I know I've mostly been talking about Raiden, but you can combine V with Spirit of Arena plus Lumina to one-shot the control dashes as well. So it's very, very powerful. Speaking of Lumina, we got these are the Luminas that went Boomina, and they're still with me. These Lumina Ascension, great. Obviously, is part of the combo. Obviously, is one of the strongest cards in his whole deck. If you could couple it with Spirit of Arena, things get really out of hand. You don't have to give things go again, which means you're going up soul. So getting Spirit out early is actually really, really helpful, because each Lumina is like an extra soul. And it's also coming in at instant speed, so it's more likely to hit, which is more soul. So really, really strong. Obviously, you're going to need to set this up a little bit. You're going to want to, try to draw some attention before you go into the Lumina, because good players are going to try to block this with armor or with cards. Good players know that this is a strong card, and they will block it. All right, moving on to some more powerful cards here. We have our 6 poppers, but they're not just poppers. These are actually cards that we do actively play a lot of the time. Celestial Cataclysm, I've been talking about being soul positive, and this is the reward in the mid game for playing a mid-range style. And eventually, if you can get this off, it's really good. Obviously, in the combo, this is one of the best soul outlets, is to go like Take Flight into Cataclysm into Saber. That often pushes a ton of damage, especially against decks that cannot block very well, especially if your hero ability is turned on. This becomes 7 or 8 go again. Really, really tough for most decks to deal with. Bolting Blade, this is a card that needs to be set up a little bit. So obviously the lowest hanging fruit is V, double charge into Bolting Blade. But you can also do things like with Prayer Bolana so if you Tunic Prayer and you have a yellow, you can also Bolting Blade. Or if you use your Warband, you can also get a 2-cost discount on these, which is not too bad. There's also situations where you're going to be charging and then charging again. Those are quite rare, but they do happen. This is a card that you're actually going to be blocking with quite a bit, but sometimes things will line up really nicely and you'll be able to play this for some big damage. All right, over here on the right-hand side, let's wrap up the main deck here. So we got 3 copies of Beacon of Victory. Obviously in the combo, combines with Lumina. This is your 6 combo pieces here. But Beacon of Victory also is really, really important because this allows you to push on hits like with Bolt. It also allows you to tutor. 99% of the time, you're going to be tutoring for Lumina. Sometimes you'll be tutoring for V. If your Tunic is on 2 and you're not really pushing damage on this turn, or it looks like you have tempo, you might just go for the V and set in an arsenal. But yeah, so occasionally you'll also tutor for Spirit of Arena, but that is a fairly rare play. But sometimes you'll do that to set up a large turn with V with the combo. Good card. One of the very few attack reactions we actually play in this deck. Speaking of other attack reactions, we have 1 copy of Yellow Courageous Steel Hand. This is just to keep people on their toes, and if they see the yellow, they might think that there's reds as well in the deck. It just combines well with everything. It is kind of the pseudo route for the deck. It can help close games with a combo, and it's just a good card. Only blocks for 2, but it's a good card. I'll create some mind games as well. Spirit of Arena. This is one of the strongest cards. This is one of my favorite cards in the whole game. It is thematic, and it also is very powerful, and it's not initially obvious why it's powerful, but it leads to really, really strong turns with Lumina, obviously. But being able to catch people off guard with instant Luminas is just really, really, really fun. There's a lot of little tricks. Eventually, you'll figure them all out with this. You can really debate like the brute scowling flesh bag. Like I've done that many times before. It's really, really nice. So obviously, if you can get that out early, you get that out early. Finally, in the main deck, rounding out the 54, we got 2 copies of Yellow Valiant Thrust. So red is the predominant one, but the difference between red and yellow is not very big. It's just 1 damage here, and if we can play this with like Take Flight and Valiant Thrust post combo is good. Sometimes we will actually have to pitch for the V. If we have to pitch for the V, then we can go V into Valiant Thrust is not too bad. But it's not the strongest card, but it is a decent card to have, and having access to Valiant Thrust just gives us a little bit more damage. So that's why we're running those. Okay, so like I said, this is the 54 card main board. We run this in every single matchup. So now we're going to take a look at the inventory. We're going to look at the equipment and the sideboard. So let's get into that now. All right, guys, this is the sideboard plus equipment suite for the deck. So we have quite a few pieces of equipment. We have actually 12 equipment, 14 sideboard cards. Let's just jump into it. So the equipment it looks a little bit complicated, but it's actually very, very straightforward. So when we're running Raiden into almost every single deck of the format, we're going to be running Warband, Raiden, Tunic, Ironsong Versus, and Snapdragons. The reason being is that Tunic is just so important in the deck. We actually don't really want to be running Soulbound Resolve that often. This card is really only good against Icelander, frankly. I know that there's a temptation to run this card against decks like Bravo, Azalea, Dorinthia, and I think that's incorrect. Basically, you need to be prepared with your D-reacts, shut down a big turn, and then make sure that you can come back with a very efficient turn with Tunic. Soulbound Resolve is really much, much better at dealing with Icelander than dealing with decks with giant dominated attacks. Okay, so I'm a little bit off topic here. Let's continue here. So that's what we're doing if we're running Raiden, right? If we are up against Kano in particular, we're going to be running with the Halo. You could also run the Halo if you are up against a ultra aggressive deck and you're playing combo. I guess the only consideration there would be Phi. Even then, there's an argument towards running Warband, but, you know, Halo does essentially block first 6 because if you think about it, charging a card into your soul, the cost of that is 6 health. So there's a consideration for using Halo against really, really, really aggressive decks. Maybe even like Max, there's a consideration there because it is a race there. Okay, so, but generally we're going to use Warband and Boltyn. Just bails us out in a lot of situations. It's blocks. It's really, really strong. If we're running the Sabers, we're going to be using the Courage. Most of the time we'll run the Warband. Sometimes we'll run the Halo. Gallantry Gold, obviously, and we'll be running the Snapdragons. This allows us to combo off with zero cost. To combo off with cards without go again, and also saves us a soul, so it's really, really nice. The No Room Boots, these are basically used against Wizards, just for the extra AB. So against Icelander, with Soulbound Resolve plus No Room Boots plus the Banner of Protection, you actually got up to some decent AB, and you could be, you know, pretty annoying to them. Okay, so that's basically the equipment here. I guess the only other thing to mention is that you're not actually going to be using Ironsong Versus that often because we don't like to pitch for things. So, but it, you know, if you have the extra energy, you can use it. But don't actively try to be using this. Also, Warband and Boltyn, if you need to use it, just go ahead and use it. Don't try to hold back on this card. The first time you need to use it, just use it. Other than that, pretty straightforward there. Okay, let's take a look at the 14 sideboard cards here. So with having so many equipment pieces, there actually isn't that many sideboard cards that are available. But the good thing is, because our main deck is 54, we only need to add 6, which is not too difficult. So the standard thing that you're going to be doing in most matchups, if you are playing the Saber combo, you're just going to be adding the D-reacts. So the Fate for Scenes and the That's All You Got. So this used to be Sink Below, but actually That's All You Got is really, really good in this deck because it's yellow, and against like decks like Dromai, this just refunds you a card. It's pretty good. Also decent against the ninjas and stuff like that. So yeah, it's actually pretty good. I think it's actually better than Sink Below, so that's why it's there. So we'll just add these defensive cards generally. If we're up against a deck that's running a ton of powerful single hit cards, we'll bring in the Reinforced Alliance. So Reinforce the Line is one of the best ways to get around Dominate, because one card plus Reinforce is already up to 7, which is quite nice. We got the package of Banner of Protections. So like I said before, with Soulbound Resolve, Null Rune Boots, and the fact that you can stack these, which is very unique because Jubil says if you do not control one, whereas Banner of Protection does not care. You can stack this to 2. Eventually, if you stack this to 3, you start becoming... So, at 1 Soulbane or Spellbane Aegis token, you're actually immune to blue Aetherized Vein, because at least on your turn. As soon as you have 2, you're immune to the yellow on your turn and the blue on their turn. And then if you actually manage to charge all 3, which is very rare, generally I could just charge 2 before the game is over. You would be immune to the red on your turn and the yellow on their turn. So, yeah, it's good. It essentially says Gate of Life. It's also very, very good against Kano as well, because if you could combine them, if you have Spell Void 3, they basically lose. Each point of Spell Void you have is basically like blocking for 5. Okay, so that's that. We also have 2 copies of United We Stand. So it's a popper. It's also a yellow light card. It kind of does everything we want it to do. So in the matchups where we need extra poppers or extra yellows, or we don't need our D-Reacts, we bring this in, because it's kind of a Swiss Army knife, kind of works well with every situation. Finally, we have a copy of Light of Soul. This card is played against the Wizards. Just gives you a little bit of extra soul, and being able to deploy a Celestial Cataclysm against Icelander is like one of the top priorities. So yeah, that's the sideboard here. Basically, like I said, you'll bring in the D-Reacts. If you need the heavy D-Reacts, you'll bring those in. Against Wizards, you'll bring in the Protections and the Light of Soul. And if you need extra poppers or you don't need the D-Reacts, then you'll bring in United We Stand. And so, like I said before, 54 card main deck. So you just have to add 6 here. Generally, you'll be adding like this, but you can go up to like 62 if you need. So if you're like up against like Bravo or Azalea, you would go up to 62, right? And then you'd pick the equipment based on the situation. So like I said, if you're playing Raiden, most of the time you're playing Tunic. Occasionally we'll be playing Spellbound Resolve. If you're playing Sabers, you're generally running Warband, Courage, Gallantry, and Snapdragons. The Null Rune Boots here is just for the extra AB against the Wizards. So yeah, that is the sideboard and equipment suite. So let's just jump back to the main cam and chit-chat a little bit, and we'll get out of here. All right, guys, that was the deck tech for the deck that I took to Worlds. Yeah, Prayer Boltyn, pretty good card. Some people were asking me, like, how did you come up with this deck list? Why are you playing Prayer Boltyn? Well, it basically comes down to the fact that if you look at the amount of playmats in the game, right, there's quite a few, but there's generally a theme, and the theme is that LSS doesn't print playmats of bad cards in general, right? That's not a complete hard and fast rule, but in general they don't print playmats for bad cards, right? So if you look at Boltyn's playmat options, the original ones were Celestial Cataclysm via the Vanguard. Eventually there was Lumina Ascension, Spirit of Arena, and then Prayer of Boltyn. And when I saw Prayer of Boltyn at a prize wall at Nats, I was like, that is a little weird. And, I started experimenting with it, and I found the card to be really, really good. And I think its power level is much higher than it initially looks. If you just look at the stats on paper, it's not the greatest, but it's what it eventually leads to that leads that card to be above rate and one of the most powerful cards for Boltyn. Anyways, let me quickly talk about the tournament at Worlds. I'm not going to cover the draft portion. I'm just going to talk about the 8 CC rounds that I had. So round 1, I get paired into, you guessed it, I got paired into Icelander. And this was really, really a tough game. I got him to 1, but unfortunately, I got killed by I think I got killed at like 11 or 12 with a flurry of Emeritus Scolding, Aether Ice Vein, and something else, Waning Moon, something like that. Not the greatest start, but I did get him to 1, so I did feel, feel okay about that. Round 2, I get paired into a dash, and they flip some Teklo armor in the leg and arm slot, and I'm like, that's a little weird. And I quickly realized that this is a ultra control, very slow, defensive tree frog dash build, and my deck basically will never lose to that because they are just so slow. Gives us a ton of time to set up the combo, and just basically one shot them with a via the Vanguard Lumina Ascension combo. I did almost run out of cards because I was waiting for the Spirit of Arena, so that is a little bit of a concern. I was kind of like, playing with fire there a little bit because I think I ended the game with like 2 cards left or something like that. So we got that one. Round 3, we get paired into a Dromai. So this is a matchup that can go either way, but this particular Dromai got a double rake in like the first 3-4 turns, and I was just very, very quickly overwhelmed by, baby Ashwings, and I wasn't able to put together any meaningful offense, and, it's really, really difficult to recover when they just generate that much ash and generate that many Ashwings in a couple of turns. He also had, I think he had double rake in the first 3 turns, so it is what it is, right? Round 4, I get paired into Mo Bogsley, teammate of Easton Douglas, and they were actually on the same list. And he sits down, and after the game, he was telling me that he's like, in his mind, he was like, please be on Dorinthia, right? Because he was on Tree Frog Dash, right? And Tree Frog Dash destroys Dorinthia, right? But basically can never win against Saber Combo Boltyn, right? And I flip Boltyn and, proceed to do exactly what I did in round 2. Again, I ended with very, very few cards, but is what it is, right? So basically, I didn't play any meaningful games, unfortunately, in the first 4 rounds. I had basically auto losses or auto wins. So I ended 2-2 there. I 3-0'd my draft pod playing Teklo. Day 2, I end up in the Pod of Doom and go 1-2. Literally, my pods had like rank 1, 2, and 3 limited elo in the world. Like it was a ridiculously difficult pod. I didn't draft the greatest deck either. So coming out 1-2, I deserved that, right? All right, so round 11, we end up playing against Matt Folks on Icelander. And this is a game where I get quite lucky because we actually ended up taking this. Basically, during the first part of the game, he drew all his blues, such that I actually thought he sideboarded out all his, Bullander style attacks. And then actually when we got down to very, very low life totals, he started drawing clumps of his reds together. And I was able to barely get there with, Soulbound Resolve and the Banner of Protections really playing a key role at the end of the game, keeping me barely out of lethal range there. But that was a really, really close game there. But we did manage to take down an Icelander there. Round 12, we play against another Icelander from Hong Kong. So round 1 and round 12, I play against Hong Kong Icelanders. And this wasn't particularly close. This one, I just struggled to find a solid offense. And I only got him down to like 10, I think, at the end of the game. So yeah, I was a little dejected there, having to play 3 Icelanders already in 6 rounds. Very, very depressing. Gem giveth and gem taketh away, right? Round 13, I end up playing my good friend Eugene. And I win the dice roll, and I think very long about whether or not to let him go first. And in the end, I do let him go first, and I get he plays Barraging Beatdown, Alpha Rampage, and I start the game at 32. But luckily for me, I'm able to maintain tempo and chip him down. And when he goes for a big Blood Rush Bellow turn, he rolls a 1 on his scabs, and that just ends his whole turn, and I'm able to keep up the pressure from there. And yeah, we get there in the end, not taking too much damage after the first turn. So that didn't really feel like a game either, unfortunately. So I'm going into round 14 feeling like none of my CC rounds have really mattered. They have either been auto wins, auto losses, or winning because of variance. But luckily, I did have one good game out of my 8 CC rounds. All right, so we get to round 14. Luckily, I do have one great game. Shout out to you if you're watching. I played against the Bravo in round 14, and this was a really, really back and forth game. Boltyn versus Bravo is... People say that it's favored for Boltyn. I think it is slightly favored for Boltyn, but there's still a lot of work that has to be done on both sides to get the W. And this was just a really back and forth game, and I mean, I had to rely on Prayer B'Elanna several times. It failed once, it succeeded once, and it was just a very, very tight end game as well. So I don't remember too many of the details, but I do remember it being one of the more memorable games of the weekend, even though we weren't really playing for anything at that point. It was just just having fun and played it for a little bit of elo. But yeah, that wraps up the tournament report there. Just kind of surface level there, but I mean, I do feel like I did run into the a little bit of I did get screwed by Gem a bit. I don't like to complain too much about Gem pairings, but getting paired into 3 Icelanders and a Dromai, there wasn't really much I could do. I got paired into 2 Tree Frog dashes, so I can't really complain about that. But like I just felt like there wasn't a lot of agency over a lot of the games that I played. It's what it is, though. All right, next up, let's talk a little bit about where I see Boltyn being in the current metagame with Icelander gone. So I think the basis of my deck is actually a pretty decent start. There's some changes I would make. I would take out the Banner of Protection, obviously. I would probably also take out the Soulbound Resolve. I don't think you really need Soulbound Resolve now that Icelander is gone. Like I said, using the Soulbound Resolve against decks like Bravo and Azalea, I think is a trap. Using the Tunic, it's just much better, because if there's a slight opening, like if they're being aggressive towards you and you either shut it down or they stumble a little bit, having the Tunic allows you to make a very, very efficient pivot. So I do think that is I do think most of the time you can get away with just running Courage and Tunic. You don't actually need Soulbound Resolve. So I also think Light of Soul probably can be cut as well. So this brings down the cost of the deck as well. What would I change those cards for? I'd probably add more pumps. So Courageous Steel Hand would be the lowest hanging fruit. Resounding Courage is also fine. V for Valor. I know some people have experimented with that and liked that. And Charge of the Light Brigade is also probably a decent choice as well. So that's where I would go from there. I'd probably start with Steel Hands and kind of go from there. Probably adding a couple red and the full play set of yellows just to maintain the red-yellow ratio of the deck. And from there, I think you're in a good spot. I think you can continue to run the standard strategies of combo into ninjas and mechanologists and you know, a few select other decks and running Raiden into most of the other decks. Yeah, I think that works. That should work decently in the current metagame. Yeah, so I guess I'll be publishing a few lists in the coming days after I do a little bit more testing. So yeah, that kind of wraps up things here. This has been Josh Lau with TheCardGuyz. I hope you guys have enjoyed this Boltyn content. I know it's a little bit late. I know, you know, Worlds was a couple weeks ago, but I do think now that Boltyn's getting a little bit more attention, it is kind of important for me to put out, you know, some of the knowledge that I have. Anyways, more Boltyn content on the way, more Boltyn streams on the way, and I'll probably be making some videos about Dorinthia, maybe about skirmish season or something like that. All right, this has been Josh Lau with TheCardGuyz. I hope you have a good day. See ya. Take care.